Welcome to Bounce, playful, unfussy conversations with SoCal's arts and culture stars. I'm your host, Susan Petrella, a lifelong arts and culture patron / advocate, and the rockstar consultant who rockets your business to success. Each Wednesday, it is Wednesday, I'm hanging out with cool, clever, creative individuals. Today's guest is Richard Chang. Richard Chang is a senior editor and co-founder of Culture OC, a nonprofit news site that covers arts and culture in Orange County. He also serves as a writer and communications specialist for Cal State Long Beach. But he's also been with the Voice of OC, LA Weekly, the Orange County Register, and he's also contributed to many publications, which he will tell us about. And I want to say I'm very excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So let's talk about this kind of arts and culture writing career. So how did you start?
That's a good question. How far back do you want to go? I
guess the other one was like 2 years old, so.
I'm not going to go back that far. I guess, my son is in 8th grade, and he's 13, and I guess I could start there, because I could, I don't know if folks here have children, but you start to see the world through their eyes also. When I finished 8th grade, I got, I guess a language skills award that, the school gave for perhaps the top student in English and writing, and wasn't really expecting it, but I knew that I could do that. Wasn't sure if that was going to be my profession or anything, but I was just really interested in my literature classes and also in writing. I was on the high school paper. I was a features editor there. I was in the I worked for the yearbook. I don't know if folks have worked for their yearbook before, but it's a year-long marathon, and you finally, everyone else gets to see the fruits of their labor, pretty quickly, especially if you're in sports. Whereas those in yearbook have to wait an entire year till the end of the year to see the final product. But, it was kind of just cool to know that me and my friends put together a keepsake that covered the entire year. And, that was back in the day we typed all the text into the yearbook. Yeah.
And do you have that yearbook?
Oh, yeah. I've got a couple of copies.
Okay.
Except one yearbook literally got chewed up by my friend's dog. So, and that was the one with all the signatures. Anyway, so I went to Brown University, and while I was there, I worked as an arts writer and arts and entertainment editor for the College Hill Independent, which is still going. We founded it in 1989. It's a joint Brown-RISD weekly newspaper. And those of you may know RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, great art school, has produced, hundreds of talented artists and illustrators and people who work in animation and musicians, David Byrne and the Talking Heads and, Shepard Fairey, and, the list goes on and on. And when I was at Brown, I got the chance, working on this joint paper, to work with RISD students, and they were really talented and had a lot of discipline, and so I kind of learned from them. They helped illustrate some of the aspects of the paper. They made illustrations and cartoons and comics and that sort of thing. And I just got interested. The RISD Museum, a small but very nice museum, was free to both Brown and RISD students. So I went over there just, during my free time, there wasn't that much free time. But I worked on a magazine at Brown called Issues Monthly, and that was kind of, I just got the bug for writing and journalism, and went to Berkeley for journalism school, and I had an instructor named David Littlejohn, who was the West Coast cultural correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Took a couple classes on arts reporting and literary journalism, and just got really into it then. And first job after I graduated from J School was at the Santa Fe New Mexican, where I worked as an arts and culture reporter for a couple of years, and that's when I sort of knew that was what I was meant to do, to do that. I should mention also that my mom is an artist, and I grew up with seeing her paint all the time. So we used to go to museums as kids. Just our parents would just take us to the Getty and to the LACMA and all the LA area museums, and so I got a taste for that too.
But you didn't become a doctor.
No. I'm Korean American, and Korean parents in wherever they are want their kids to become doctors. So our mom wanted all three of us boys to become doctors, and none of us did. My older brother's an architect. I'm, I guess, an arts and culture writer and editor, and my younger brother actually became a rapper. Not not rapping presence, but like a hip hop artist. But now he works for he got a law degree, and he works for a video game. They're actually the entertainment sophomore advisory board that puts the E on for the labels, for E for everyone, M for mature. So he's he's been doing that for a while.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us about your writing. So a lot of history here in Orange County with various publications, and now you joined Culture OC.
Yeah. So I'll backtrack. I started working at the Orange County Register in February of 2000. So gosh, it's been 25 years. Can't believe it. Seems like yesterday. And I was hired as an arts reporter. It was a job that opened up. I had seen it back in '98. Applied a couple times. One time they froze the job, and then I just kept on applying for that job because I felt that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just you have to in journalism, it's kind of competitive and it's who you know. And I just kind of made my inroads to try and meet as many people as I could within the paper.
Network.
Yeah, network. A comedian who's since been disgraced, who hasn't been disgraced these days, had said, "It's not who you know, it's whom." So it really is. Sometimes David can probably agree. Oftentimes, when things open up, it's who you know, it's your connections, so that that opening happens. It's kind of and the people who hire. I don't want to get into the whole journalism job business, but it's a very it's a who you know kind of thing, and especially in the arts. Arts communities are relatively tight knit, and people know who each other is, and they can spot a faker a mile away, Or
so do you have a signature style as a arts writer?
That's a good question. I would say, I went to Berkeley and took literary journalism, and I think that the journalists that made the biggest impact were known as the new journalists, such as Joan Didion and Hunter S. Thompson and Tom Wolfe, and I try to intersperse some people of color in that conversation, but it's hard because they were the lions of that movement, which is called the new journalism. So taking literary devices and techniques that they get from fiction and instilling them into nonfiction, I think that was kind of where I cut my teeth. I'm very trained as a nonfiction writer. When I was in college, I used to write short stories that were fiction, but I guess I see the utility in nonfiction, and sometimes, even though occasionally I'll read fiction, I don't always see the utility in it. And maybe that's a very sort of practical statement, and I'm sure, there are lots of fiction writers and teachers who would, attest that fiction has a lot of utility and that it reflects the truth. But I've just been, because of my training, I've been really searching for truth in what I'm writing. And I guess I've been influenced by literary journalism. Big fan of Joan Didion.
Okay.
There's a slew of great writers out there. I'm trying, just for the sake of this country, I'm trying to read as much authors of color as I possibly can, you know. Because you know what, like I was an English major, and I've already been colonized in my mind with all the British lit that you can throw, you know, out the window. I'll just keep throwing it, you know. So many books. But I don't know, I think that's the newer chapter in American history in this saga, and I think it's, you know, it's worth
So does that
pursuing.
mean your writing has changed from, you know, the very beginning, you know, having been at the Santa Fe New Mexican to, you know, the Register to LA Weekly to The Voice to Culture OC? Have you?
So when I made the transition from mainstream sort of newspaper journalism at the Orange County Register to the LA Weekly, and that is a shift. You know, most people have the perception that the Orange County Register leans a little conservative. Having been in the halls of that newsroom, yes, the editorial side does for sure, more libertarian, but the newsroom is pretty objective, and most people, if you corner them, would tend to lean left. Journalists, news people tend to lean a little to the left, although we try and keep it as objective as we can. But when I joined LA Weekly, there was already the assumption that you're a progressive left-leaner. That's just the way it is. You know?
So that changed your writing?
I was able to use curse words, whereas in a newspaper you cannot. You absolutely can't. Was able to use a little more first person, which, you know, when you are classically trained, you omit the first person in journalism. That's just to give it more an objective view, but able to write a little longer sometimes, to inject a little humor into it. But humor is a dangerous thing, though, because A, you may not always be funny, and B, you know, there's a fine line between making someone laugh and offending them. So you have to be careful, especially in writing. The tone, sometimes you have to be very intentional. You know, I'm sure like folks here may have received an email or a text where tone is not apparent, and it could be perceived in a couple of different ways. I've had that before. Writing for some of the magazines that I've worked for, sometimes you have to take on the voice or the perspective of the magazine. You know, like, so I've written for Art News, Art and Auction, Modern Painters. I'm just giving you some of the art-related magazines. Art Limited was a cool magazine for a while that I guess they just went belly up, like so many publications. I used to write for a publication called Art Voices magazine. And some others locally, like Laguna Beach Magazine, Newport Beach Magazine, the Times OC, the Daily Pilot, you know. Every publication has its own style, and you read that publication and you sort of adjust to that style. You don't always bring your style. You kind of have to adjust to the style.
Okay. So tell us how you get an assignment. So how does that work? What's the process then? So I don't know. Do you get an assign? I mean, are you assigned, or do you say, hey, I want to review, you know, this dance performance?
That's a good question. So
and how does that go? You go and.
So if you're a freelancer and you have a relationship with, like a magazine editor, for instance, they will often have a story that they would like written based on their interests or what's going on, and they'll ask you to go check out an exhibit, and so that's an assignment. If you're like a full-time writer at a newspaper or publication, you're responsible for keeping up on what's going on. So you should be looking at all the websites and know what's going on at the Orange County Museum of Art, and you know, and the Laguna Art Museum, and the Bowers, and all the little, you know, the galleries, and Brea and Irvine and Laguna, and you know, some of it is obvious. You know, when festival season rolls around in Laguna Beach, Sawdust, Festival of Arts / Pageant of Masters, and Art Affair, you know, you're going to write a story about that.
So you're out and about a lot.
I have been getting a little older, so I'm not I'm not hitting the town as much as I used to. Plus, I have two young children, 13 and 7, and so that I'm not as out and about as I was in my salad days and my single days.
So you'd go out and
Yeah.
you'd go to this performance or such or whatever, and then what happens? How does the
So yeah,
how
I
does
mean,
the-
it depends
how does your
on
written piece get done? Or
it depends on what you're seeing. So if it's an art exhibition, you can typically you can take your time. There are sometimes rules in a museum where you can't use pen, you can't use ink, you can only use pencil because pen can damage art, pencil can be erased. Typically it depends also if you're doing like a preview or a review. If I'm doing a review, I'll have a close look at some of the art in a gallery or a museum, and I will tend to take pictures of everything on my phone.
Okay.
Because I don't really have a photographic memory, and those people who do or claim that they do, I kind of doubt that. If you're looking at 500 different pieces of art, it's really hard to memorize them all.
Do you record like your whatever? Do you record as you walk through like a exhibit that you're going to be writing about? Do you do any kind of, or you just take photographs?
It's usually just photographs, but if there's some video that's in a room that I'm going to write about or that's important, I might record it. Some institutions have rules against video.
But I mean, you speaking about what you've seen or
No,
whatever
no,
for
I
your
don't do that.
writing. No?
I don't do that.
Oh, interesting.
I have a notebook. I carry a
Oh.
notebook with me everywhere.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, I've left this notebook everywhere too.
And you have lots of those notebooks, right? I'm sure.
Sure, yeah, but typically there's the one notebook that is the operative current.
Is that
Notebook.
is
This
that
is
2025's notebook?
This is 2024/25. So I'm at the very end, thankfully. But there are some rules. If you're going to see a live performance, you shouldn't be recording it. Sometimes they don't allow photography either. You just need to know what the house rules are also.
Do you read the press release or any
Sure,
of
yeah.
that written
I mean,
material?
I do.
To get a feel for what you might
Right.
say?
Institutions put out press releases if they want press coverage. They usually have someone in-house or someone that they've hired to write the press release. I mean, those items have information that you may not have gathered yourself, from either seeing something or looking something up on the web. They know, details that may have escaped you. It's a cardinal sin, though, to copy straight from the press release into your article. That's something, we've seen people do, and it's considered verboten.
Okay.
But some of that information does seep into your piece.
Do you have a favorite medium that you'd like to cover?
That's a good question. I guess, I'm pretty old school. I like looking at painting, but photography also I enjoy looking at. If we're talking about visual art, there are different iterations of that, which is, sculpture, mixed media. If I just say painting, there could be oil, acrylic, watercolor,
Right.
gouache, there's various iterations of that. And some people, like Rauschenberg would combine things. He would do the combines, literally, where he would, one of his most famous works was a dead stuffed ram with a tire around it, on next to some painting work. And it was kind of, I think it has a tennis ball in its ass. I'm pretty sure about that.
It's okay.
So, that was considered almost scandalous in its time, but now it's considered like, this is a great work of abstract expressionism, right? So I think sometimes people in the current moment, may not understand a piece of art. I like to help contextualize things, especially because I know that people enjoy going to museums, and I know that people, consider it a cultural fun thing to do to go out and see a show. But when they're in there, I also know that some people don't always understand or don't always get what they're seeing, and they may have a few questions like, "Is this really art? If my kid could do it, is it really art? If I could do it, is it really art? Why is it enshrined in the museum?"
Right. Why is it?
Yeah. So I like to try and answer those questions. Why does it have such a big price tag on it?
So what do you say?
Well, there's a lot of different questions, so there's a lot of different answers.
Okay.
And I think I've been kind of, and nobody steal this idea, but I've been thinking that I would like to write a book, like a dummy's guide to contemporary art, because these questions seem to pop up because people like going to museums, but they don't always understand or get what they're seeing. I think one thing I want to help people understand is context, why someone does something, what they do, compared to what they've done in the past and what their peers are doing, what's going on in that environment, and also process, I think, is important. Art these days, contemporary art, is not always about the very end product that you're seeing on the wall. Sometimes it's about the process that an artist got to where that piece is. And even when it's hanging in a museum or a gallery, its process hasn't even finished yet. There's still more to be told when the piece comes down and something else comes up, and where that piece might go. There was an artist, I think it was Rauschenberg.
You ever think about Rauschenberg?
Yeah, he was one of my favorites. There were a couple instances which I find kind of funny. He took a Cy Twombly artwork that somehow he came into possession with and painted all over white over it, and then he hung it and said, "This is my work now," but it said, homage to Cy Twombly, whose work I just painted over with white. So even a completed piece isn't always completed.
That's a fascinating.
Is that if it's hanging in a museum? No, it's not allowed. That's a criminal act. But I think he was given the piece, or Twombly gave him the piece as a sort of gesture, and then he sort of, as his own gesture, painted over it.
But that's very interesting because I, a number of the interviews, I'm interested in the process, but never really thought about, okay, say the painting that I'm looking at, across from myself, that, it's not done yet, that, it could change depending on, where it goes next.
Yeah, it also
such.
Changes depending on who's viewing it.
Who's viewing it,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like a Moreau piece, here, could be seen in one way in one era, and a different way in a different era,
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about this new venture that you're part of.
Yes. So Culture OC is, thank you for asking. We're a nonprofit website that covers arts and culture in Orange County. We were the arts and culture team that used to work at Voice of OC, and there was some, creative differences. We had a mutual agreement to part ways with Voice of OC, and the team that used to work at Voice of OC is the arts and culture team. And in fact, I did a piece on Skeeth and the whole Costa Mesa art scene for Voice of OC. We sort of branched off and created our own site, Culture OC. It's cultureoc.org. Please visit. It's free. There's no paywalls. You can become a subscriber for free too. We cover the arts in Orange County because we feel that there's been a vacuum of that in this marketplace. The main media, the Orange County Register and the LA Times, just almost completely ignore arts and culture sometimes in Orange County. And we know because we used to be the people who used to write for those publications. OC Weekly is also gone now. We have a bunch of OC Register, OC Weekly, and some LA Times people who work for us. We cover visual art, music, classical and popular and jazz. We cover dance, ballet and modern. We cover theater, from plays and musicals, and what's going on at South Coast Repertory, what's going on at the Chance Theater, Maverick. We cover books, comedy occasionally, sometimes think pieces, art news, like new venues in our community, and we just, in some of the more popular type of stuff, and festivals that go on, like we just had Lunar New Year, so we covered some of the Tet celebrations and some of the Chinese Lunar New Year celebration at the Segregation Concert Hall. So we're trying to fill a void in the marketplace, I think.
So do you get to write in all those different areas, or just one specifically?
Well, so I'm the senior editor.
Okay, senior editor.
So I assign and receive and edit the stories that come in. When I do write, I will typically write about, if people are giving their contributions for like what's going on in 2025. I'll write the intro, I'll write the visual art section, and then I'll edit everything. Editing is kind of, I've kind of become the editor because in journalism school I had a hard ass instructor who was like, AP style book, memorize this thing. And so I did, and
So you gravitated to being the editor.
yeah, well, it's almost kind of the default too, because no one else wanted to do it. So, but yeah, no, I'm a stickler, even though language changes and evolves over time, like this, the biggest conundrum these days is whether you should say they for a singular
Not anymore.
noun. That's the biggest conundrum, I think. One of the biggest. I'm kind of a stickler for grammar. But you'd be surprised how many people just say they all the time for a singular noun, like a group or institution or a company, or they say they all the time. And I'm trying, the thing is, our culture is changing, so that people will say they and everybody in the same sentence, but everybody, if you're a stickler for grammar, everybody is actually a singular noun or pronoun. But the culture is changing, so
Getting a little bit more lenient about the grammar then?
yeah, it's sometimes it's a case by case basis. But now they can be used to identify a person as their pronoun, and so that confuses everything, and we try to be respectful of that. I'm not gonna, if someone identifies as non-binary or a they, we'll put that in there. We'll allow that, and maybe we'll explain this person wants to use they them pronouns. That's actually AP style. I mean, if you guys know or don't know, the AP style book is kind of the Bible of journalism. If there's one style book in common among journalists, it's the AP style book.
Okay.
Other publications may have their own style book, like the LA Times and the New York Times has their own style book, but if in doubt, AP style book.
I think I had AP style in college or whatever to write papers and such. Because there were certain.
So I remember I was in journalism school. We had a big test. If you can pass this test, then you don't have to take my next 6 weeks of AP style class. And it was me and this other person who passed, so we didn't have to take this extra class.
So you've been in Orange County all these years. Writing about. So what have you see that's changed or not changed, or what could you say about?
That's a good question. I would
Orange
say
County's arts and culture.
the institutions of higher learning, like Chapman, like Coastline, like Cal State Fullerton, UC Irvine, have really amped up their game as far as sharing, educating, and exhibiting art. Chapman has the New Hilbert Museum of California Art. UC Irvine acquired the Gerald Buck collection and the old, the Joan Irvine collection, and now they have what they call the Langston Institute of California Art, and Museum of California Art. It's known as Langston IMCA. It's just a mouthful. But right now they're temporarily located in the old Irvine Museum. Has anyone been to the old Irvine Museum
Oh, God, not
on Van Carmen? I mean, they have shown some great paintings there, and it's been free. But that's been kind of consumed by this new Langston Institute. But they still show stuff there, and they have extremely ambitious plans to build a brand new museum, and they're going to show some of their Gerald Buck collection, which has some of the greats of California and 60s and 70s art. From Peter Alexander to Larry Bell to, a lot of art and writing about art it's kind of like a name game. David, you know that, right? There's so many great artists, but if you are able to have familiarity with the key artists, it just from the writer's perspective, the public art writer's perspective, it gives you a little bit of legitimacy that you know what you're talking about.
So the educational institutions have upped their game.
Yeah,
over
that's
the 20 years, and so
I would say
what
that's
else?
probably the bigger trend that I can see. Even Fullerton has, they have the Grand Central Arts Center in Santa Ana, and they've completely redone their visual art campus.
Yeah, gorgeous new building.
And they've got a new Begovich gallery there. Even Irvine Valley College has a new visual arts and arts complex.
Okay.
And they spend a lot of money to amp up their game. I would say, like some of our institutions that have been here for a while, like the Bowers Museum has expanded. The Laguna Art Museum, I remember they had a plan. I was talking to you about this earlier. Bolton Colburn had a plan to build a third floor up there on the roof, but that was squashed. I don't exactly know, David and Julie might know a little bit better about what their future plan for expansion might be. I don't know if that's even in the cards for them. And then, of course, the Orange County Museum of Art went from its old Newport Center location that was really difficult to find, it was kind of tucked in there, to the central location of the Section Center for the Arts. And I would say that was a big deal.
Okay.
Has anyone been to the new Orange County Museum of Art? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the building is built by Tom Main and Morphosis. I'd say it's a very interesting building, but it also has the steps that lead to nowhere. At the very bottom, adjoining the plaza, the Argyros Plaza, the steps that lead to basically a glass wall to nowhere. And then beyond, there's a terrace with steps that go down, and then a wall that does not allow you to go anywhere.
Yeah, that was really weird.
That's very bizarre.
Yeah.
But I mean, and having covered that for a long time, I know the original plan was to have the steps go all the way down to the plaza, and people could sit and enjoy their lunch, whatever, enjoy the sun, and be able to walk up and walk down. But then they would be bypassing the front entrance, and they didn't want people to do that and just sneak in for free. Ironically, they got a big donation from Lugano Diamonds to allow for free admission for the first 10 years. So even though they cut off that access,
The artery, yeah.
their admission is free anyway. So it's kind of a paradox, I guess.
So what is, as our renowned art critic in Orange County and beyond, so what would you like to leave us with?
Well, first of all, I would say that I'm not renowned.
Okay. Well, you're very well known.
But, I think what I can leave folks with is go out and see something. There's lots to see. Even here in this gallery, there's a lot to see. There are a lot of hidden gems out there, but you have to, in Orange County, it's not always immediately apparent. You have to kind of, it's not, we don't have like a Miracle Mile, or we don't have a downtown LA, with the Broad right across the street from Mocha. You kind of have to go out of your way to specifically check out the Laguna Art Museum or the Bowers or some of the galleries in Laguna or the Orange County Museum of Art. You have to have a very you have to have a plan. But it will reward you if you go out of your way to go and see something, because you'll probably be surprised by what you see.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing your story with us. You've made Bounce bounce. A special thank you to our generous sponsor, Coastline College, its Fine Arts Department and Art Gallery, David Michael Lee, director, curator, and professor. He's also Bounce's fabulous producer. Thank you, David. Until next time.